I gotta admit, I threw this one under the rug. I ignored it. I thought, oh, well, here's another Final Fantasy that I'll buy and won't play until I absolutely have to. Kinda like the Dissidia games. One day. All in all, this game and trailer totally flew under my radar until I was researching for a previous video and came across the trailer for Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin. If you're not paying attention to this game and you call yourself a Final Fantasy fan, let me take just a few seconds and completely blow your mind. Because I've seen a few videos on the trailer and demo, and it seems like some connections aren't being made that I think are absolutely key parts. Starting with the title of the game. First off, we can throw out the Final Fantasy Origin part. That's pretty easy to deduce that it's an origin story from that title. Got it? Okay. It's the Stranger of Paradise part that everybody's missing. If we mosey on over to the Polygon article linked below in the description, the producer of the game, Jim Fujiwara, goes on to talk about how the game is essentially the story of Final Fantasy I told through the eyes of a villain. This part is absolutely crucial when looking at the title of the game. Why, you may ask? The answer, dearest viewer, lies within British literature during roughly the mid-1600s. There was a little fella called John Milton, and he had just finished putting out his magnum opus that was to be called Paradise Lost, a gigantic collection of 12 books that, upon reading, seems to tell the tale of the Bible from Satan's point of view. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Stranger of Paradise, Paradise Lost. Stranger of Paradise is basically Final Fantasy I's story, but from a villain's perspective. Although I'm not 100% that that's the reference that they were going for, I just think it's very interesting, if anything, even if I am stretching just a bit. What? I just wanted to stretch my literature muscle just a little bit. Just editing this video, and one thing I didn't talk about was the fact that they used the song My Way by Frank Sinatra. It's really interesting because, I don't know, it's almost like a sarcastic use of the song, I Did It My Way. I don't know, and thinking about Jack Garland and that whole thing of why, like, he would ditch the rest of the party members to become this evil creature. I don't know, that's something to think about too, and I meant to talk about it in the video, but I didn't script that part, so anyway, I thought I would interject. Anyway, back to the video. The biggest moment that made me pause the video and stare at my screen with my jaw on the ground was this moment right here. About 4.5 minutes in. Here's the scene from the NES version of that game, and I mean, come on, man. Look at that. I had chills run through my entire existence at that moment. I mean, you gotta understand. I've been playing this series since 1992. I'll go more in detail about my own story with the games in the future, but for now, in my 30 years of playing the series, this was a moment for me. It was almost as if Square didn't forget us older fans after all. Side note, I know that this game isn't necessarily being developed by Square, but they had to have seen that part and just smiled a little bit like we all did. This isn't a moment that we all missed, really, just more of a moment that made my eyeballs leak just a little bit. Who's cutting onions in here? Another moment that made me rethink the entirety of the first game is the new version of Princess Sara. She admits to Jack Garland that she loves him. Now, just sit with that for just a moment. When you play through Final Fantasy I, in any iteration of it, Sara is already in the throne room of Garland. Let's suspend reality and think about this for a moment. Let's say Garland didn't necessarily kidnap her as the king makes you believe before you go rescue her. What if she willingly went to visit her bad boy love interest and the king was just completely oblivious to the whole thing? Then she really finds out that Garland is a terrible person and she can't get away until you show up to save her. In the original NES version, Garland shows extreme possession. No one touches my princess. In the PSP version, it's more of a leverage thing to overtake Cornelia. And think about it. How did Garland kidnap her when the castle is full of people and guards and all that? Is it because Garland was once the king's swordsman or whatever? So there's a past between the king and Sara. Maybe this relationship was arranged already and Garland just turned out to be, well, chaos. I mean, come on! There's a lot of unanswered questions throughout the trailer for me. Does Jack turn and eventually become chaos? Does that have anything to do with why there are seemingly 5 warriors of light off and on in the trailer? And having Jack turn will just leave 4? I don't know, and it'll certainly be interesting to see how it's done. One thing to remember with this, it's not exactly a retelling of the first game. It's more of an alternative universe type thing. Am I excited? More than you'll ever know. Will I do a more in-depth video on it once it's released? You betcha. Is Final Fantasy II a baby giraffe that can barely walk? You'll have to click on that video to catch that information. Man, that was a terrible segue. Cut that. Who writes these scripts?